Oh no, what are we gonna do?
Boondocking out in the desert in 100-degree heat.
The slide won't come in no matter what we seem to do.
No mobile RV techs are willing to come out and help us.
We're on our own for this one.
Blood, sweat, and tears, as well as troubleshooting, disassembling, and some ingenuity.
We have to dig deep to save ourselves this time.
We have the Lippert Schwintek in-wall system in our travel trailer. For the past year or so, we've noticed that the rear side of the slide can sometimes come in more slowly than the front. We adopted the habit of having one of us stand outside and push, while the other activates the motors with the switch inside the RV, hoping that this bit of assistance would get us by without having to do a costly repair. Of course, that didn't turn out to be a long-term solution.
On a Monday morning, just after Easter, we were planning to pull out of the Joshua Tree National Park. The rear end of the slide refused to move at all. At that time, we were in the South Dispersed Campground just outside of the National Park. This BLM land isn't close to any cities, and there were not a lot of campers there after the weekend.
So, as I said, we had no motion on this rear end of the slide. The first thing to consider is that an obstruction may exist. I looked under the slide at floor level. There was no debris under there. The slide travels on these wide black rollers. They appeared normal, meaning that they touched the slide's underside, but did not touch the RV's main floor surface. And they could not be rotated with my fingers alone.
Now, we started looking at our owner's manual and at a number of online resources. And it seems that the most common problems come from a failed motor or the two motors become out of sync with each other. So, step one is simply reset the electronic controller. In our RV, the controller is beneath the dining room seat. Resetting it is easy. Just push the small white button 6 times and then hold it down on the 7th push. Holding it down for a few seconds brings it into manual override mode, and it'll start to flash its green and red lights very quickly. You release the button when the flashing begins. In our case, this didn't help.
We spoke with a number of tech people from both Grand Design and Lippert. All of them told us that each motor acts as a strong brake, holding the slide in place when it's not running. So, removing one or both of the motors should allow the slide to be manually pushed in.
The motors are easy to access when the slide's in, but ours was stuck in the out position, so we began to remove the decorative molding on the sides of the slide and the particle board behind the decorative molding, just to be able to get to the motors.
Since the front part of the slide seemed to be moving properly, we tried removing the rear motor only and pushing while the front motor was electrically activated.
No luck.
We tried removing both the front and rear motors and pushing again. Either way, there was no motion in that back end of the slide, even with 4 people pushing together.
We recruited a few of the neighboring campers to help. The motors are tricky to remove as well. First, there's a set screw on the outside at the top of the slide. Then, back inside, we used a screwdriver to lift the motor up out of its slot, and we had to wiggle and pry it until it came out. Putting it back is even trickier because the motor's spindle has to align properly into the hole.
There is a flat spot on the spindle, so it has to go in a certain way. We marked the outside casing to help us get it in the right direction. Then Heather pushed the slide activation button to get the motor spinning, while I tried to watch if it rotated into the proper position.
Lots of patience required. A side note, we only had the power connected to one motor at a time for this part, so only the motor we were working on would activate.
By this point, it was clear that we had to jump fully in or sit helplessly in the desert, as we had called 6 mobile RV technicians and none of them were willing to come out to help us.
Very frustrating.
Once again, we can give a shout out to Grand Design. Grand Design is the company that made our RV, and they offer a good technical support service.
When they weren't able to diagnose the problem precisely over the phone, they initiated a video call and were able to give us the tips that we needed.
Since everything else had failed, Grand Design's tech support suggested that we fully remove the entire H-frame mechanism from the slide's rear side, since something must be jamming up in there. This assembly is made up of 2 horizontal gear racks and the vertical H-column. These screws hold the gear racks to the slide's wall. These screws hold the H-column into the RV's wall from the outside, and there are also 2 steel brackets holding the H-column from the inside.
There are a lot of screws and some very sticky butyl tape holding these parts to the side of the RV, so this took a while to remove.
Yeah, it took a while.
And some damage to the decals.
Be sure to get a secure support under the heavy slide before unscrewing the whole thing. It can move once this assembly is no longer in place.
Even with our makeshift support, the top section leaned out a bit, and we had to push on it to help keep it level while bringing it in.
Okay, so it's removed now, and it's once again time to try bringing the slide in. Heather's inside, activating the one motor that is still in place, while I'm out here getting ready to push on the rear. I was very surprised at how easily the slide moved now.
Just a few inches at a time, we brought in the front side with the motor. Then Mike pushed the rear side in a bit. The tech support guy told us that it's important to keep the slide parallel to the RV's wall and not let it get out of parallel by more than 2.5 inches.
It took just a few minutes to bump it in little by little.
Also, throughout this entire process from beginning to end, we had to do that manual resetting of the controller because it would trip out almost every time we moved the slide.
This happens for a few reasons. It can sense the resistance from the stuck slide, and it can sense when we only had one motor connected.
I think we must have reset that controller about 50 times over the 2 days that we worked on this.
Move the slide in 2 inches.
Nope.
Do a reset. Move another 2 inches, reset, and so on.
Once the slide was fully in, we realized we had a big gap in our RV that would let in all the elements. So we slid it out a few inches again and reinstalled that long seal to eliminate that gap while we traveled. Then we pushed the slide fully in again.
Now once this H-frame is out, the slide is no longer stable. If you were to drive with it like this, the slide could slide out as you turned corners. But it can also shift forwards and backwards during braking and acceleration. So we cut some 2x4s into braces to avoid any possible slide movement in each direction during travel.
One brace sits on the floor and one brace sits on the top. We screwed the top brace into the front facing of the slide to hold it in place, as well as having part of the wood go over the top of the slide to keep it up.
This part keeps it from sliding in or out, and this section keeps it from shifting front to back. In or out, front to back.
As we looked at the removed pieces, we quickly realized our problem.
This is the top rail. The bearing block slides along, and it feels pretty darn good. This is the bottom rail, and I cannot move this. So that's the cause of our problem. This wheel still is turning, but the block itself,
it's just jammed in there.
The bearing block on the lower slide rail was jammed solid.
Solid.
As we looked closer, we saw that it was even sitting slightly cockeyed in the rail. No wonder it would not come in, no matter how hard we pushed.
The job isn't 100% finished, but at least we're able to drive safely now.
We'll most likely need a new bottom slide rail and bearing block to reinstall and sync up both motors.
We've both got some cuts and bruises, and we learned a lot about our slide system. We feel grateful that we were able to get ourselves moving again.
For a bit there, we were worried about how long we would be stuck in the desert.
Yeah. A shout out to our 22 MLE Facebook group who offered their thoughts and advice too. Thanks so much. When you're in a pickle, everyone's help is always appreciated.
We are also happy that we have an RV that can still be lived in with the slide in. It will be a little tight, but it's doable until we can get the parts and service we need to repair it.
Yep. Until next time, we look forward to seeing you on the road and hopefully with a working slide.
Check out some of our other videos and subscribe to our channel.
New content will be posted weekly.